Did you know that creativity actually thrives with limits? It sounds backward, right? But get this. A study by Harvard found that teams with constraints were up to 30% more innovative than those with total freedom. We often think that the more freedom we have, the more creative we'll be. But here's the twist. Having too many options can paralyze us. In fact, research shows that too much choice leads to worse decision-making and lower creativity. Shocking, isn't it? This video will explore how constraints, like time limits, fewer tools, or even creating our own rules, can actually make us more creative. We'll dive into surprising examples, powerful strategies, and exercises you can use right now to unlock ideas you never thought possible. Stick around, because we're about to show you why less is the new creative superpower. Let's jump in. Chapter 1. The Paradox of Freedom. Why more isn't always better? Have you ever stared at a blank page with no idea where to start? You're not alone. It's a common misconception that unlimited freedom helps creativity flourish. In fact, having too many options can feel overwhelming. Studies show that people are more likely to take action when they have fewer choices. This phenomenon is known as the paradox of choice. In creativity, it works the same way. Fewer options lead to better focus. When you face constraints, your brain is forced to work differently. Consider this. Research from the University of Amsterdam found that students given fewer resources produced more creative solutions than those given plenty. This sounds strange, but it makes sense. When you're forced to solve a problem with limited tools, you think outside the box. For example, Dr. Seuss wrote "Green Eggs and Ham" using only 50 different words. The limit forced him to push his creativity, and the book became a huge success. The same applies to businesses, too. Twitter's 140-character limit was originally seen as a constraint, but it led to a platform that thrived on brevity and creativity. Sometimes, less truly is more. Chapter 2. The Constraint Formula. Turning limits into creative fuel. If you want to turn constraints into creative fuel, you need a strategy. The first step is to embrace your limits, rather than fight them. Legendary artist Pablo Picasso once said, "Without great solitude, no serious work is possible." For him, isolation was a self-imposed constraint that boosted his artistic output. He set clear rules for his creativity, and this structure led to masterpieces. A simple strategy is to give yourself boundaries before starting a project. For example, limit your materials, time, or the themes you explore. A study published in Creativity Research Journal showed that participants given strict time constraints created more unique ideas than those with unlimited time. It's all about forcing your mind to work under pressure. You can try this yourself by setting a timer for 10 minutes and limiting your creative task to just one topic. Another way to fuel creativity with constraints is to change your environment. This doesn't mean booking a flight to Paris. It can be as simple as working in a new room. Research shows that altering your physical space can shift your thinking patterns. In one study from Stanford, participants who walked instead of sitting came up with more creative solutions. So, a quick change of scenery, combined with some personal limits, can be a powerful way to spark new ideas. Chapter 3. The Genius of Self-Imposed Rules. One of the most effective ways to boost creativity is to impose your own limits. Some of the greatest minds in history did exactly that. Take Igor Stravinsky, for example. The famous composer would deliberately use dissonant sounds, even when smoother notes were available. He knew that challenging the norms forced him to create music that was truly original. Self-imposed constraints also played a key role in Steve Jobs' innovation at Apple. Jobs believed in simplicity and constantly limited the number of products Apple worked on at any given time. In his biography, he explained that narrowing focus allowed his team to innovate more effectively. This focus on fewer projects helped Apple develop iconic products like the iPhone. Here's a strategy you can use. Give yourself a set of creative rules before you begin. For example, limit the number of colors you can use in a design, or restrict the number of words you can use in a blog post. These constraints will push you to come up with solutions you might not have thought of otherwise. If you're a writer, you might find inspiration in Hemingway's 6-word story challenge. The idea was to tell a complete story in just 6 words, and the result was, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. This exercise forces your brain to pack meaning into each word, creating more impact with less. Another unique approach is called reverse constraints. Instead of limiting yourself to fewer options, you force yourself to use unusual ones. This method works because it makes you approach a problem from a different angle. For instance, a designer might limit their color palette to shades of one color, forcing them to focus on texture and form instead of relying on bright contrasts. These self-imposed rules can seem restrictive at first, but they are the key to unlocking deeper levels of creativity. When you train your brain to thrive within limits, your ideas become sharper and more innovative. Chapter 4. The 10-Minute Challenge. Unlocking rapid creativity. Let's talk about a simple, yet powerful tool, the 10-Minute Challenge. Setting a short time limit to complete a task can force your brain into high gear. It's called timeboxing, and it's a proven way to spark creative thinking. When you know the clock is ticking, you're less likely to overthink and more likely to dive right in. In fact, research from the University of Chicago found that people tend to be more creative under moderate time pressure. Why? Because it stops perfectionism in its tracks. You don't have time to worry about making things perfect, you just focus on getting ideas out there. The 10-Minute Challenge is easy to try. Pick any creative task, writing, sketching, brainstorming, and give yourself just 10 minutes to work on it. No distractions, no second guessing. The goal isn't to create a masterpiece, but to generate ideas quickly. You might be surprised by what you come up with when you let go of the pressure to be perfect. For example, imagine you're trying to write a short story. Instead of agonizing over the first sentence for hours, set a timer and start writing immediately. You'll find that the words flow more freely when you're working against the clock. In the end, you'll have something to build on, and that's far better than staring at a blank page. Musicians, artists, and even entrepreneurs use this technique. Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter, is known for using timeboxing to stay productive. He blocks out short, focused periods for each task, allowing him to make fast decisions and move forward. If you find yourself stuck creatively, the 10-minute challenge can break the block. The key is to keep the time limit strict. You can always come back later to refine your ideas, but the initial burst of creativity often happens when you give yourself less time, not more. Chapter 5. Using constraints to overcome creative block. Creative block is frustrating, but it's not the end. In fact, it's often a signal that you need to change your approach. This is where constraints can help. By introducing limits, whether it's time, resources, or scope, you give your brain a new challenge to solve. Let's take a common example: a writer facing a blank page. One effective strategy is to limit yourself to writing just 100 words. This constraint forces you to think carefully about each word, and often, the act of starting small can unlock bigger ideas. Or consider this. In a study published in Psychological Science, participants asked to draw with just one color produced more creative designs than those with access to a full palette. The limitation pushed them to explore new ways to work with what they had, leading to unexpected results. This same strategy can be applied to any creative field. If you're designing something, limit yourself to 3 tools. If you're composing music, try using just one instrument. By cutting down your options, you'll push your brain to find solutions in areas you hadn't considered before. Even the legendary architect Frank Gehry famously said, "Creativity is all about imposed limits." Gehry often faced strict building codes and budget restrictions. Instead of seeing them as barriers, he used them as starting points for innovative design. His most famous work, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, was shaped by these very limits. The next time you feel stuck, introduce a constraint. It could be as simple as giving yourself a deadline or limiting your tools. Often, the block isn't a lack of ideas but a need to reframe the problem. Constraints give you a new lens to work through. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more insights into creativity and innovation. Let's keep exploring the wonders of creative thinking together.